Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap. Really excited about this one. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we'll be doing a drawing for 6 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 6 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is automated deployment monitoring with Codefresh and Lightstep. Our speakers today are Guy Salton, who is the solution architect at Codefresh, and Eric O'Rear, who is the developer marketing at Lightstep. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Charlene. So maybe I'll just start with quickly presenting myself. My name is Guy Salton. I'm a solutions architect in Codefresh. Codefresh is a CI/CD platform built for microservices and Kubernetes. We'll see it as part of the demo today. You also have my email address there on the slide, so feel free to send me any questions, notes, feedback, whatever. Happy to chat. And Eric, I guess you can.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric O'Rear, and I work in developer marketing at Lightstep. We're an observability platform built on best-in-class distributed tracing. I'm really happy to be here today because I love talking with people about observability, and I think the CI/CD work Codefresh has done is stellar for teams and developers. So really excited to demo using Lightstep and Codefresh together today. Go over our agenda really quickly. Guy and I will each talk about Codefresh and Lightstep respectively. We'll look at how CI, CD, and observability fit together in cloud-native systems. Then we'll have our demo, automated deployment monitoring, and wrap up with a brief summary. You can find the sample app at github.com/ejoreo/oteltodo if you want to follow along the code there.
Great, so a bit about Codefresh. As I mentioned, a CI/CD platform for Kubernetes. It's actually the first container native CI/CD platform. And that means that if you look at this diagram on the right-hand side, you see a classic CI/CD flow of a containerized application that starts with cloning a Git repo that holds the source code of the app, then run a Docker build, build a Helm chart, run some integration, performance security tests, and then push the Docker image, the artifact to some Docker registry, and finally perform a deployment to Kubernetes. With Codefresh, each of these steps runs as its own container. So this provides an isolated environment for each of these steps, which makes it very easy to reuse these Docker images across pipelines. And we actually created a very big library of built-in steps that you can use in your pipelines. We'll see some of them in today's demo. Codefresh is also fully enterprise ready and has a flexible delivery model, but today we're going to show the SaaS platform, meaning that we created some account in our SaaS platform, and the builds are actually going to run on some built-in SaaS runners based on Kubernetes clusters that we host in the cloud, Codefresh. But you can also run builds on your own Kubernetes cluster behind the firewall. So this is not really the topic of this webinar, but this is just another option. And Eric, you can continue.
Thanks, Guy. Lightstep is an observability platform built on best-in-class distributed tracing. It allows users to analyze 100% of their event data. We don't do any upfront sampling, so we rely on dynamic sampling to make sure a full representation of your data is coming through onto the platform. Lightstep provides automatic deployment regression detection, so you don't have to spend time figuring out if there's a problem. We'll surface that problem for you and even make automatic comparisons to healthy states of your system. Lightstep also uses powerful aggregate trace analysis to make possible real-time and effective root cause analysis. So again, just doing a lot of the work for developers and bringing the important insights to the forefront. By relying on open source efforts like OpenTelemetry, Lightstep makes instrumentation and setup easier without forcing users into vendor lock-in. So if you've instrumented for Lightstep, you've instrumented for every observability tool, which I think is really powerful flexibility. So what is observability anyway? It's the process and practice of understanding your system. It's kind of vague, so let's narrow that down a little bit. And I'll jump ahead of the question, how is observability different than monitoring? I really like this quote from the new stack that said, monitoring as a discipline requires you to predefine normal and then freeze it with ruthless efficiency, suborning agility and humanity and adaptiveness in the sake of producing a steady state system. I think a key word in that definition is adaptiveness. Under the monitoring paradigm, you have to decide a metric is important ahead of time, relaunch, and hope your hypothesis was correct, and the new dashboard you made is going to be useful. But what does this tell you about how your system is actually performing? The truth is, there's too many unknowns in modern software to just throw together some dashboards and call it a day. There are a lot of things you might want to know that you're not getting from these dashboards. Why does a particular type of user account have worse response times? What's correlated with this particular failure? When did this error start occurring? So how do CI/CD and observability fit together? With the increase in velocity that a CI/CD system like Codefresh provides, there's lots of trade-offs. Teams are more agile and moving independently, but that also leads to gaps in communication and really siloed services that are efficient and can iterate really quickly. But again, there's trade-offs at speed. So with the speed, when you're making all these deployments and rolling out new features, how do you know that your changes are improving performance or resolving issues? To be able to notice, you need observability tools. Nope. And to be able to make your systems observable, you need to instrument them. This instrumentation will allow your code to emit telemetry data. At this point, the standards for instrumentation are aligning under projects like OpenTelemetry that provide vendor-neutral telemetry API and SDKs for a wide host of languages. Right now, I think it's in beta for half a dozen. It includes automatic instrumentation options that make it really easy to get started if it's for the right languages. There is, of course, manual instrumentation that will always build on top of this automatic instrumentation, but these agents really provide a good base layer for understanding performance in your system without needing to modify your code very much at all. So setting up for the demo today, we have a Kubernetes cluster set up already. Our sample application has a pre-configured Helm chart, and we've already deployed a version of this application. In the previous webinar, we spent more time discussing the specific setup and instrumentation within the app itself. And we'll go over that in just a second as a brief recap. But today, the to-do app that we made, we found has been so popular that we want to enable auto scaling, but I have a feeling we might run into a little trouble. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, and we'll also show, as part of the demo, something really cool, I think, because in the last webinar, for those of you who participated, you maybe have seen that we showed you how to easily roll back changes to previous versions or previous revisions of the same Helm release. But last webinar, we did it manually from the Codefresh UI. then we saw that it can be done with just a click of a button. But today we added some automation around that. So we'll see, and Eric will show us how Lightstep can detect and increase in latency and degradation of performance of the app that's been deployed, and then can send an API call to automatically roll back to the previous healthy version once this is detected. So add even some more automation to what we in the previous webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. So switch gears real quick. So just to cover some of this stuff really quickly to set the ground for what we did with the application in the last demo. This to-do application is using Spring for server logic, so Java-based on the server side, and Vue.js for the client. We also added OpenTelemetry instrumentation to discover and better understand application performance in our little to-do app. You'll notice YAML files as you're looking through the code. These are providing sort of a infrastructure as code element for containerized builds and deployments with Kubernetes, Helm, all of which we're managing through Codefresh. We showed how we can instrument mini services with very few lines of code. This is what it took to get the Java aspect implemented. We added,
by the way, Eric, if you can just scroll a bit up, then you can also see all the prerequisites. And we especially did that so you can go and really try it out yourself. So we shared the link to this GitHub repo, which is public. All you need to do is just sign up to Codefresh and Lightstep. You can get a free account in both. Make sure that you have a Kubernetes cluster, you have the Helm client installed, and then you can just follow along and do this all by yourself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So we also added it to the client, which is really interesting to be able to get like detailed telemetry data coming from the browser. And that involved making one extra file and a few dependency imports. And we also covered the OpenTelemetry collector, which is a process that aggregates and exports telemetry data from multiple other processes and gives you a layer of abstraction there for better control. Again, all of this is in the demo repo at github.com/ejaoreo/otel-to-do. If you have questions about the setup or instrumentation of this to-do application, we'll be happy to answer those later. So what's this app we're talking about? Well, it's a little to-do app that gives you cat facts. So if I say first to do, it should be added to the list, and we've got our cat facts, so it's working. It's growing wildly popular. People love the ability to add to-dos and receive cat facts as a reward. Who knew? In anticipation of this dramatic increase in traffic, our team has let us know we should probably increase the auto-scaling capabilities of our Kubernetes clusters. So that's going to be the code change. That's going to be the basis for our push that will monitor with Lightstep and see happen with Codefresh. So I want to hand this over to Guy now. Talk about Codefresh for a little bit.
Yeah, great. So we'll just talk a bit some of the setup things that we had to do before we'll start the actual demo. So this is the Codefresh platform that you see there. Now Eric just jumped into the account settings and we see the different integrations. So before we are going to run the demo, we made sure that we connected our Git repo to Codefresh, and you see you can just click there. And by the way, Codefresh is completely Git agnostic, so we're using GitHub in this example, but if you can just click on the add Git provider there, Eric, you'll see that you can use Bitbucket and Azure DevOps and GitLab and whatever you want. And then we have our repo, and we'll be able to access it from the pipeline. Then next, we connected our Docker Hub, Docker registry as a Docker registry integration. And here we also support all the popular providers, so ECR, GCR, Artifactory, but you can use any other Docker registry using the other registries. And then we can easily refer to this, the name that we provided this Docker registry integration easily in the pipeline. We'll see that we have steps for built-in step for pushing an image to a Docker registry. Then for Kubernetes, of course, we have a built-in integration where we integrated our GKE cluster, and this is where our application is already deployed, and we can see our cluster here. We can see the nodes. The integration is based on simply a Kubernetes service account, and you can add any kind of cluster, like an EKS cluster, GKE, AKS, even IBM Cloud, DigitalOcean, whatever you want, and even on-premise clusters like OpenShift, Rancher, everything is supported. And lastly, once we connected our Kubernetes cluster, we also show that the Helm integration, Codefresh is, by the way, one of the main contributors to the Helm project. And for those who are not familiar with Helm, it's a package manager for Kubernetes. With Helm, you deploy something called charts, right? And we'll see that very soon. Codefresh provides a built-in Helm repository. So you see this is the Codefresh Helm repo there. You can just use this for free to manage your charts and deploy them. We're going to use that in the demo today. So that was a bit about the integrations. Now we can go back to the main screen, and here we can see all our projects and pipelines and builds. But before that, you see the DevOps Insights section. There is Codefresh is both a CI and CD platform. We have built-in dashboards to manage your deployment. So can you click on the environments there? We can manage all of our environments, and this is our to-do production environment. We can actually see all of the previous builds that made change to this environment. We can see the live status of this environment. But then if you go to Helm, we have a built-in dashboard to manage Helm releases for any of Kubernetes cluster that you created and connected to your Codefresh account. So we can see our CF demo cluster. This is our GKE cluster, and we see that we have one Helm release already deployed here. As Eric mentioned earlier, we deployed the app before we started the webinar, but then we're going to make a change and increase the number of replicas to trigger auto scaling, and we'll see how this reflects here in Codefresh. So yeah, Eric, I guess you can take it, and we'll make the change. This will trigger the build, then we'll see that the pipeline exactly see what it does, and then we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks, Guy. So before we jump into the code and make the auto scaling change and push it up, I want to be really good about monitoring my application and being proactive. So being a Lightstep user, I've jumped in here and I want to create some activity, create a stream for both my client and my server that's going to allow me to view data coming in as any changes made. So if we go to the server stream, and let's look at it for the last 24 hours, we see we have pockets of activity. And this is latency on the y-axis, and then sort of absolute time here on the x. We have different color lines that respond to different P levels of latency. So your P50, P95, and P99. And if we look at any of the specific points, you'll see little dots getting highlighted. These are specific traces that contain the telemetry data that's coming out of our application. And so if I see something that looks like, man, that's really high latency, like what's going on, I can click on it and be brought directly to this trace view, which has breakdown of operations involved in that trace, their contribution to latency, their overall time. So one of the really neat things, and sort of the whole purpose of this demo is to say, okay, I've got this service, specifically the server for my application, and I know I'm about to make a change. But if something happens, maybe I want to be able to automate controlling the status of that deployment. So if things go awry and it's really high stakes, we can actually set up a condition that will allow us to trigger some sort of webhook action. This might be a message in Slack. This might be some other webhook. Today, it's going to be a rollback function.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see that, yeah, you saw the Codefresh UI for a bit. Every action that you can make in the Codefresh UI, like triggering a rollback, can also be done using API calls. So that's what you did, and we did, and Eric will show you, yeah, how this can be automatically triggered from Lightstep. Send this API call to Codefresh once this threshold has been breached, and then this will automatically trigger the rollback.
Yeah, thanks. So to create a condition, we have our threshold. In this case, it's if our P95 latency is above 1 second. You know, maybe it's a bit strict, but for the case of the demo, it's what we want to use to trigger. And there's several options here. There we have direct integrations with PagerDuty and Slack, or you can make custom webhooks. And in this case, we're using a rollback function. This is a cloud function that we made in GCP, and we'll pop over to that here in just a second. Cool. So with the alerts on the system, if that rollback webhook gets triggered, this is what we're sending out. So we have a few headers that we set with the webhook, and these are going to be really important for fulfilling the Codefresh API call, which is happening right here. And this will trigger, as Guy pointed out, a rollback that could be done through the UI, but if you need something more dynamic, more programmatic, this cloud function is a good way to do it. And now let's jump into the code. So here we have our YAML file. This is our code.
Yeah, this is just for those of you who are not familiar with Codefresh. The pipelines are using declarative YAML. This is what you see on the screen now. So you can describe any of the steps in the pipeline as declarative YAML. So you see the main clone step there. That's the step that's going to first clone our application, clone the GitHub repository with the master branch. Then we're gonna run a Docker build, and this, as you can see, you don't even need to run explicit Docker commands. We have a built-in step for building Docker images. Again, the platform was kind of built around microservices and Kubernetes, so you can just set the type of the step as build. You can add any tags. You can point to the Docker file that you have in your Git repo, and it will automatically build the image. And you can even add any annotations as any custom metadata. So once the Docker build step is finished successfully, we would add some like a quality annotation. You can add like a link to a Jira ticket, and then we'll nicely visualize this in the Codefresh platform itself. So we're going to build the two images for the two apps and then deploy the chart. So there's also a built-in step for deploying a Helm chart. You can see there.
Yeah, and then at the bottom here, we have a space for some environment variables. And right now our server replicas are at 1. And again, in anticipation of this traffic, we're going to go ahead and change this to 5 replicas and make sure we have good resource allocation as demands on our app spike.
And we configured our CI/CD pipeline to automatically trigger, to automatically run whenever we push any commit to the master branch. So now that Eric he made a change there in the YAML file, it's gonna push a commit, and then we'll see that this will automatically trigger a build in Codefresh, and clone the repo, build the Docker images, and deploy the Helm chart with this new value.
Cool, so committed that.
Yeah, now we see that a new build just started. We can click on it and see it's running. So it will then run each of these steps as its own container. And by the way, what it does to share data between steps as we use containers is that we provision a persistent volume for each of the pipelines, and then we mount this volume to any container in the pipeline. So then once you clone your Git repo, it's automatically, all your project files are automatically placed on this volume, and you can then easily access any of these from any subsequent steps. This is true for dependencies or anything like that. And then Eric, if you can just click on this existing, like current running step, the Docker build step, you can see in the logs, it has built-in caching optimizations for Docker images. So both Docker image caching, distributed layer caching. So even if you make some change to your app, this will automatically reuse any existing layers of the image from the cache and only build new layers. So this can really speed up your builds, and again, it's all happening automatically and out of the box. You can also see the resource utilization there at the top. You can see some information like the commit that triggered the build, the name of your pipeline, the repo. See them in the matrix below, like this matrix button. You can see how much CPU and memory is now being used by this build. And again, we are now running this build on a SaaS runner. So you don't really have to install anything on your own infrastructure to run Codefresh pipelines. But again, if you do need to run some builds behind firewall, or you do need to use your own infrastructure, then you can just install our agent and then make your pipeline run on your own cluster. So we see that the server Docker image was built. Now the client one is being built. And then after that, it will go and perform the deployment with our changes.
Yeah, and once this build completes, we'll head over to the app and interact with it a bit and try to generate some traffic and take a look over at our streams in Lightstep and see what sort of activity we were getting and whether or not we've triggered a rollback with any poor latency behavior. So this should be done in just a second. So right now, if we go to GKE,
Yeah, maybe you want to show the workloads, yeah, and then we can see the amount of replicas. So we see it's still 1, right? Because the deployment has not been done yet. But once the deploy step will run, then this should upgrade the Helm release that we have on the cluster, and then change the number of replicas from 1 to 5. I think it was just
great.
completed.
So we had a successful build.
And now you can refresh this screen, I guess, and we should see
Yeah. So we have 5 now. But getting an error. So, okay, our change went through. Let's head over to the app. To generate traffic, and this is one of them. So we just did a bunch. Let's delete a few of these. See if we can overload our app a little bit. Maybe add a couple more things to do. Okay, so we've got some activity on our to-do application. Maybe not enough to freak out Kubernetes, but let's see if Lightstep sees some behavior that is less than ideal. So the refresh rate is every several minutes. So this might take a second because the build just went through. Taking a bit. If I check out the client stream. 1 hour. We can move through time. We'll wait for it to load, but I can talk about the UI a little bit here. So with our streams, we're able to look at either custom time ranges, or you have a set of preset option, but this is time series, so it's going to be sort of linear time. Streams can be filtered by several different factors, including errors, latency percentile, and duration. Again, these conditions are really good. You can share streams if there's really important data that comes up. Make it easy to share this across your team. And this is not behaving. Okay, great. We're seeing some traces, some spans come in from our traces. Let's tighten this window a little bit. Maybe some more traffic. Okay. So we're seeing our span data, but it does not look like enough latency is getting generated to trigger our rollback. Status is being flagged as okay. In our Explorer view, we get to look at things in real time. And this, so, okay. In the span, we're saying 4 seconds, which should definitely be triggering it. Oh, we got an alert. So here, our alert has been triggered. We have a couple traces provided as examples. Let's look at the worst one. Yeah, and this is the one I had just found a moment ago. So I think the UI was lagging a little bit. But in here, we know we have a function, find all, and it is slow, very, very slow. So this gives us a really good starting point immediately. We see a specific operation. This black line means it's on the critical path. So statistically, it's very correlated with contributing to latency. And so it gives us a great launching point to investigate further. But the principal point here is this condition. And so let's pop over to Codefresh and see if our deployment rollback. So we're going to go to Helm in the DevOps Insights. We're going to want to look at the release. Okay, this is our app.
Yeah, and here, by the way, in the services tab, we see all of the services that are deployed as part of this release. If you can just quickly go back to the services tab, just on the left on the releases. Yeah, so we see for every service that is deployed as part of our release, we see the number of replicas, we see the Docker image that is deployed, and we can see the health and status of any of these services. And then if we go to history, then we can see all the previous versions that were deployed as part of this Helm release. We see the current version, that's top one, and then we see any previous version before that, and you see that rollback button just on any of these revisions. So this is clickable, so that's what we did last webinar. We were able to just we just clicked on the rollback function, the rollback button there once we noticed that there was some performance degradation. But here we had this Google Cloud function that automatically triggered the rollback. And then we can also click, if you, Eric, you can click on, let's say, V7, for example, on the anywhere on the, yeah, exactly here. Then you can see the chart, you can see the values for each of these previous versions. And then if there was some change in one of these files, it will also indicate and show you exactly the change, so you can see exactly what changed from this version to the next version. So these are some of the built-in this is some of the built-in things that you have with Codefresh. I saw some question, by the way, on the questions section on how Codefresh is different than shippable, for example. I think that shippable is more focused on CI. Then I think that they are trying to support more native Kubernetes deployments, but then Codefresh was built from the ground up as a CI and CD platform. So you have both these built-in deployment rollback capabilities, these dashboards for managing the deployments, all of the artifacts management and all that, as well as the more flexible delivery, I would say, where you can run completely SaaS cloud hosted builds, but you can also easily run with the hybrid approach using our runner. So I guess these are some of the differences.
Awesome. So let's check our work. Good, so right about 10:35. So there should be a nice way to see that. Let me refresh this.
While we're waiting, I do want to remind the audience that if you do have a question for either Guy or Eric, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be getting into questions in about 10 or 15 minutes or so there's plenty of time to go ahead and submit your questions.
Cool. So after I did the refresh, we can see we got a few extra versions here. That's because I set up rollback functions on both the client server, on both the client and the server. So it actually triggered twice. And we can see it once here, and then once more, going back to sort of our first fresh start deployment, version 9 and version 11, which are going to be the same as version 1. So that's cool to see it happen in the UI. Guy, anything else you want to speak to before I poke around Lightstep a little bit more?
Yeah, one last thing. If you can go to the images view, remember I showed you that you can add any custom metadata as annotations to your image. So then if you can click on any of these images, like the first one on the list, for example, first of all, you see that the Docker registry is the Docker Hub registry. We see all the information about this Docker image. So when it was created, we see it was automatically promoted to Docker Hub because our build step automatically has this capability of automatically pushing every built image to your desired registry, and then it can use the built-in caching optimizations that I mentioned. And then you see on the right-hand side there, we see all the annotations that are assigned to this Docker image. So then, for example, if you're running any unit tests as part of your Docker build process, right? So you can have your unit tests embedded in your Docker file. Then you can then just say, as part of the Codefresh YAML workflow, like we did, once the Docker build step passed successfully, this means the unit tests also ran successfully, and then I can add like a quality annotation indicating that this image has passed some tests, right? And then you can filter images based on these annotations, and you have this screen for any Docker registry that you use. It doesn't matter if your images are hosted in Docker Hub or ECR or Artifactory. You can also see the Docker file of the image. If you scroll all the way up, Eric, here in this screen, you see that you can click on the Docker file. You can see all the layers of the Docker image and see the size of each of the layers. And then if you can go back to the summary tab, I think the coolest thing about this screen is actually the code section there, just on the left in the kind of like the middle of the screen, because this lets you see the end-to-end traceability from this image that is already deployed to our GKE cluster, all the way back to the commit SHA. And Eric, if you can just click on the shop there, and it takes us back to GitHub, and we can see exactly the change in the source code that eventually triggered the build and deployed our app. So we see exactly this change that we did together with you, right? We changed the number of replicas from 1 to 5, and we know that this is the commit, the last commit that is included in this Docker image. So especially for this, for the world of microservices, if you're deploying multiple times a day, and it's sometimes hard to keep track on what was deployed and where, with Codefresh, it's very easy to see exactly which commit is included in your deployment. So that was the last thing I wanted to show there.
Great, and that was actually an awesome segue. So there was like a very small little Easter egg put in to sort of force latency. We had a sleep function running, and we got a big clue to that when we were looking in Lightstep. So I'll jump back over there. Oh, now we've got much better activity here on our stream. So we're seeing we're blowing our SLO of P99 under a second out of the water. We have things in 6, 7, 8 seconds of latency. And again, here we have representatives traces. And again, we're seeing that find all operation is really problematic. So if I want to address this change and fix the performance, Lightstep has helped me find exactly where that problem is coming from. So why don't we address that and sort of close the loop here. So look at that, just where I had it. So we'll get rid of the code associated with this bad development practice. We'll save that. And then we'll get a proper build going. We had a rollback which addressed the problem, but we want to maintain our replica count and push up a new fix. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And if we come to Codefresh, hop to our builds, and like magic, it's already happening. And we're getting great feedback from the UI about what step we're in, how long it's taking. And I think that's awesome. So a couple more things about Lightstep. This is our streams feature, which again, really want to emphasize is really good for tracking and monitoring your SLOs and configuring custom responses to behavior that you know is problematic and that you really need to avoid to keep your customers happy. But I'd really like to bring us to the service directory, where we just get a nice high-level view of our key operations for each of our service. And again, we have a client service and a server service. Yeah, latency, behavior at a glance, error, percentage, and rate. And these are ordered by the amount of change or performance change they've seen. So if things are spiking or dropping or getting bottlenecked, Lightstep does a good job of bringing those to the forefront and making sure they're on your radar. So I think I'm about done.
Great. So you want to jump back to the slides, and then we can. Yeah. So we finished with the demo, and then we can kind of summarize what we did and have some time for questions, which is always great. So we saw that Codefresh makes it easy for you to continuously release and roll back deployments of your services. And we saw how you can use the Codefresh YAML. Maybe I see some questions about that. We can talk about some specific parts of creating this Codefresh YAML and adding the steps. Yeah. Then Eric, you wanna talk about
the? Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, and Lightstep is the best way to quickly and accurately understand your service health and know when you need to roll back or give you confidence that everything is okay. It's really best-in-class tracing, and the correlations and aggregate analysis that we're able to perform on millions and billions of traces is currently kind of in a league of its own. So if you're looking to make your systems more observable and get rid of blind spots in your performance and try to have a more dynamic relationship with your data, I really encourage you to sign up for that free trial and give us a shot. And again, you can find this app in the public repo at github.com/ejoreo/otel-to-do. I suppose the Cloud Function and the Lightstep specific webhook integration won't be represented there. But again, if you have questions about enabling any of that, contact myself or any of my colleagues at Lightstep, and we'll be happy to help you.
All right, guys, we have about 6 or 7 minutes for question and answer periods, and we've gotten some great ones in so far. So why don't we just dive right on into them? Here's the first one for you. Does the Codefresh platform support OpenShift platform and VMs?
That's a good question. So Codefresh, as opposed to other CI or CD platforms, it was kind of built for Kubernetes and microservices from the ground up. Having said that, we do support OpenShift. So an OpenShift cluster can be integrated just like any other Kubernetes cluster to Codefresh. So you can definitely connect your OpenShift cluster and easily deploy applications to it, either with releasing a Helm chart, or just we also have a built-in deploy step that simply updates the Docker image that you have deployed in your deployment. So this works like same for OpenShift or non-OpenShift clusters. Then for VMs, it's less the focus, but it is supported. So if you if you think about it, again, we said that every step runs as a Docker image in Codefresh, and we even have some examples of this in our online documentation. What you can do is you can just use any existing Docker image for a step and then run any commands in the context of this image. So let's say you want to deploy to a VM and you want to use Packer, you can just use the image of HashiCorp Packer from Docker Hub for your specific deploy step and then run your Packer commands to create your Packer image. And then in the next step, let's say you want to deploy to a VM in Google Cloud or in AWS, you can just use a step that create a step that uses a Docker image that has the AWS CLI or the G-Cloud CLI, and then run your commands to perform the deployment to the VM. So it's not as native as deployments to Kubernetes, but it is supported.
Excellent. Okay, next question. The codefresh.yml, will that be generated, auto-generated based on the configuration via the user interface, or do I need to learn the new language syntax?
So that's a good point, and the answer is kind of like in the middle. So maybe Eric, if you're still sharing your screen, if you can quickly go back to Codefresh and click on the actual pipeline. I want to show you. So this YAML is not really being generated automatically, but then if you look at look at the workflow, so you see the steps button on the right hand side, and you can just use this to you can see all of our built-in steps there, like releasing a Helm chart, building a Docker image, even more advanced deployments like Canary deployments, blue-green deployments. We have built-in steps for all of those, and you can just click on any of these steps, like let's say push an image to a Docker registry. Yeah, you can just click on it and then copy the step into your pipeline. So you don't really have to learn like the whole language by yourself, because like you can just click on these boxes and copy it into your YAML. So it's not like really building it from scratch. You can just use this editor in the UI.
Excellent. Okay, next question. How do I set the threshold on Lightstep to normalize the workload transition alarm?
Thanks for the question. I think that's something I'd route you to one of our technical account managers to give you like a nice detailed sort of thorough response, but that's going to be out of the scope for this Q&A for me.
Okay, so we'll so somebody from your organization will follow up with Mario then to get their question answered. So Mario,
absolutely.
All right, so you'll be well taken care of. Okay, another question here. I think we have time for one more question. How is the granular support of how does the granular support of RBAC work in Lightstep?
That's going to be in a similar box. I can't speak to our role-based authentication in the most detail off the top of my head. So we'll circle back and get you a solid answer for that.
All right, guys. So Venkata, they will be following up with you offline to get your question answered. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out the question and answer period well, actually, oh no, we didn't. Okay, so if we do have another question come in, I'll be more than happy to ask it. I think we have another minute or so that we could use for questions, but we don't have any more right now. So while we wait, I'll just remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's event, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to live on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. We actually did get one more question in, I believe. If my computer wants to keep working. Okay, how do I customize predefined templates shown for Codefresh steps?
Interesting question. So we're actually, if you, Eric, can you click on the close this box there, and then you can see where it says use YAML from repository. So currently we have a few options there. You can either use inline YAML. Can you click on the inline YAML there, Eric? And then this means that you can just edit your Codefresh YAML here in Codefresh. The other option is what we actually used in the demo, which was to store the Codefresh YAML in our GitHub repo, and then this is also managed under version control. But we're actually now going to release next month another option here, which would be to use a template for your workflow, and then you can create templates of like standardized workflows, store them in any Git repo that you want. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the same repository as your source code of your application is, and then you would be able to create pipelines from these templates, and we'll even have some enforcement there where you can decide, like on the account settings level, if you want to be able to override some of the templates, or just like inject some variables on the templates, include some part of a template YAML in your existing pipeline, and a lot of cool stuff there. So it's yeah, interesting things to come, and it actually should be phase 1 of this feature should be released next month.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, we are about 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so I am actually going to close out the question and answer period for reals this time. So if we didn't get to your question, which I think we did get to all of them, but if you come up with a question that you want to have the guys address before the end of the webinar, please go ahead and still put it in the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions tab. They're going to be getting a copy of all of the questions that come through. So any questions that are in there that we didn't get a chance to address, they will get, like I said, get a copy of them, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline to get your question answered, including the 2 that we didn't get a chance to answer during the webinar. So, okay, also at the top of the hour, I did let you guys know that we'd be doing a drawing for 6 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. Who's in charge of drum roll? Okay, all right. All right, our first winner today is Bob B. Congratulations, Bob. Our second winner today is Drew H. Congratulations, Drew. Great name. My son's name is Andrew. Drew. Winner number 3 today is Vic P. Congratulations, Vic. Next winner number 4 today is Phil W. Congratulations, Phil. Our 5th winner today is Mohammed S. Congratulations, Mohammed. And our final winner today is Judy K. Congratulations, Judy. We'll be following up with all of you offline to get your gift card to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see it in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Guys, Eric, Guy, thank you so much for a great presentation today. Lots and lots of really great stuff. Love the demos. They're lots of fun to see, and great technology all the way around. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your expertise, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody. Please stay safe.